Witchy and Weird podcast.
Hello, Witchy and Weird. I am here with Luna today. Luna is an astrologer and mystic mentor for spiritual people who desire to manifest a mystical life through astrological teachings, rituals, and an intuitively led life. Luna's methods of supporting her clients consist of creating a conscious soul-led life, blending birth chart astrological mapping, intuition development, learning witchcraft, or embracing their calling to manifest prosperity. Luna's spell that she casts through her work is to support creatrix witches to rise up and live a confident life where they believe anything is possible. Hello, Luna.
Hey, yay, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I feel like you do like all the really cool things that everyone wants to know about. So I feel like this episode is going to be really cool. But first I wanted to like ask you like what's your like story? How did you get to this place in your life where you're like this is what I help people with?
Yeah, and to be honest, it's a an ever-evolving process and a ever-evolving clarity. I feel like there's just so much clarity that I continuously have to tap into and anchor in, especially with there's so much noise out there. But yeah, I feel like, a lot of people they say, oh, I got to find out my soul purpose and I got to figure out what I'm here to do. And, sure, people actually pay me for that. I have people come to me and they pay me to tell them what they should do with their life. But I do believe that that's actually not something we have to find. That's something that's always been inside of us and something that kind of gets more permission. We get more permission and we get awakened and we remember. So I think like astrology and witchcraft and magic was just always something like that for me. It was more like a remembering and a permission. But if normal like situations were permitting, I would just be doing astrology. I would be studying it when I found it when I was 12 years old. But I had people around me say that astrology was bullshit and it's not scientific, so it doesn't make any sense and my experiences aren't valid. So I was a little bit confused by the way that the world was interpreting my relationship to magic and my relationship to the universe and being alive. But essentially I just felt like, most little witchy children, I just connected with my sun sign, right? Like I felt like, I don't know who taught it to me or what happened, but I remember really resonating with being a Pisces, and that's just all that I knew. And over time, I realized there was more, but I didn't know that being an astrologer was actually a job and something I could do. I really had no idea. I thought I had other plans. I thought I was going to be a circus artist, a professional circus artist, and like selling macrame jewelry on the side of the road. But anyways, yeah, I was just going to astrology again and again, and I found astrology on my lunch breaks, like when I went in high school, when I went to the cafe nearby and I was looking through the magazines and I was just trying to talk about it with people. And long story short, I met this librarian in my high school. She was actually an astrologer, and I was seeing her after school and I was just like asking her questions. And at this point I still thought that astrology was just like the 12 zodiac signs and whatever. And life goes on, still kind of studied astrology in the background. And I was working at homeless shelters in Victoria in Canada, and I basically knew that I was supposed to do astrology when I was, rummaging in the back of the files and I was trying to find people's birthdays. And I was having like a lot of really mystical experiences with the homeless clients. Like it was amazing to see that they were actually so open to it. And I felt so connected to them through that. And I was really supporting them, like very like through astrology. And I didn't really like tune in that maybe that's like what I'm actually just supposed to be doing. And I was on the phone with my brother one day, and I called him freaking out about how hard my job was and how dealing with overdoses and the drug scene and violence and just like the things that come with working in shelters. And he said, well, yeah, that's just because you're in, like, he's an Aquarius. And he's like, well, yeah, that's because you're in the homeless community. You know, you just need to get out of that community and into another one. And I was like, yeah, but I don't really know where I belong or like what I would do. And he's like, why don't you just be an astrologer or whatever? You love that stuff. And I was like, holy shit, like I could do that. And it was pretty much in that moment that I decided that this was what I was going to be doing. And then after I decided that, I invested a lot of money that I didn't know I had into mentors and all the things. And here we are today. But yeah, like the rest of magic and witchcraft and stuff like that just came like so naturally. Like I just, nobody gave me a tarot deck or anything, but I walked into the store and found the tarot speaking to me, and all of a sudden I'm having magical experiences, and I was doing ritual without really knowing what it was. So that's kind of my long rant. So yeah.
It's really cool. I think like a lot of people have similar experiences where it's like they're really drawn to something their whole life. This one thing keeps coming back to them. They're like super interested in it. But then because of like society or whoever we grow up around, they don't think like that is an option open to them. So it totally makes sense why you're able to like help people with that part too.
Well, you know what's interesting about that is my sister, who's 19 years old, she's actually like, I definitely am very influential and a big personality, and she was looking for guidance and she was very confused. So I was kind of like pushing astrology a bit on her, and I was like, like this can help you. Like I can read your chart. Like this is like why you have like an astrologer sister. Like I can help give you guidance, if you really don't know. And long story short, she's now obsessed with astrology, and she's been my apprentice, and I've been like teaching her stuff, and she just calls me all the time, and we have all these magical experiences together. But then I was on the phone with my mom, and she's like, I have to tell you, I'm worried about Emily. And I'm like, why? And she's like, well, she's just copying you. She's just doing what you're doing. And I'm like, no, she's actually like, she really loves it. Like she's the one that's studying it, and she's the one that's freaking out. And my mom's like, well, I'm just worried she's not going to have a stable job, and she really wants to be an astrologer. And I don't know. It's like, she's like, does she have what you have? And I'm like, what the hell? What the hell is this? Like, why can't we just support her? I was like, Mom, let's just support her and encourage her, and until it doesn't work out, or until she changes her mind or whatever. Like, I don't want to just be projecting and fearing and worrying about things when someone comes to you and is like, I'm so passionate about this thing, and she's a Gemini rising. So her big influence is siblings to her personality. And so I'm her freaking sibling. And so anyways, yeah, I just don't really buy into the fact that we're always like worried about things. And I just think that like life is actually, I don't know if it's in my birth chart. I have a lot of oppositions and challenges supposedly in my birth chart, but I don't know what it is. But when I follow my intuition, and when I am in touch with my heart, and I say yes to my desires, and I help other people do the same thing, life is pretty great. It's actually not this scary, horrible, awful thing that happens. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how do you like blend together? You said you help people with like intuitive development, astrology, and witchcraft. Do you like have like a special way that you like blend all those together, or is it more like specific for a client's needs?
I love this question. Nobody's asked me this question. Yeah, well, I guess like intuition development does feel a little bit more quote unquote basic. So, the basis of living an intuitive life like really comes down to like it's a lifestyle. It's not actually just like, oh, I'm going to learn how to be intuitive. It's when people come into my container, I'm like, okay, we're just going to squash all your beliefs about everything you've ever done in your life, and we're just going to now live by your intuition. And so that's a big deal for a lot of people, and that is the transformation right there. And there's a series of steps and all that. So if any client wants to work on that, I do that, but I have a program or, a course that people can buy. They kind of just get into that world if they're wanting to get introduced. And then usually people will, they want a birth chart reading. They want to go a little bit deeper. Astrology has that component to it. There's a lot of intuition that's involved. And then I have my Academy of Witchcraft, or previously known as the Baby Witch Academy. And generally people who already are intuitive and they're in touch with their desires. They know they like astrology, they know they like magic, but they just want to be in like a coven of witchy people that are together and learning this stuff and have a guide. So then generally they'll come there. And then, it's kind of it's a whole vibe in there. But yeah, I think it really, like, I have so many tricks up my sleeve. So it really depends what each client is wanting, because sometimes people come to me and they just want to focus on business, and so I do like mystical business coaching and stuff. And other times people, they just want to dive into their birth chart and they want to experience the most incredible life possible, and they want to understand who they are and why they're here and just come into their confidence. So there's a whole people are so multi-dimensional, right? They have so many different things, but I do find at the end of the day, like, the most simple teachings are the most powerful. And I know that it's really cheesy and I have all this like big nerdy brain of knowledge and science and mathematics of the sky and all that. But at the end of the day, it's actually quite simple. And it's really comes down to self-love, comes down to compassion and gentleness, comes down to your heart and trusting that and following that and getting rid of anything that doesn't really serve. So, and I think that's essentially what witchcraft is and what being a witch is, right? Is we're just reclaiming our power and we're reclaiming our magical essence from a system that is broken and a system that has told us that that's not a thing. So yeah, it's just good to remember that we do all these little practices and we have these little jars with our little chili flakes in it, and we're doing all this, like, it's all just to come back to our power, and whatever that means for you. And it's so different for everybody in so many different stages of life. And I do find that we have to continuously remind ourselves of our power and come back to that space again and again.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with you. I teach people like psychic and intuitive development, and like I feel like it is like that black box thing for a lot of people where they don't know what it is, they're overwhelmed. And really the most like common thing that they just need is to learn how to trust themselves, like to learn how to listen to themselves. And it feels like so simple, like to say it to people, like in like a TikTok video or something. People are like, what are you talking? Like, no, it has to be like some other thing that needs to be unlocked, some like ancient secret spell I have to say or something, and it's like, I feel like as humans, we're just like overcomplicating a lot of stuff, or we're taught to overcomplicate. And with intuition, it's like the opposite of that. So it's really hard to like tap into that kind of like frequency where you're like, oh, that feeling that I got in my body, all I have to do is listen to that instead of like read into it and try and disprove it and do all these other things.
Totally. I think it's mostly because we've been taught to not listen to our intuition. And there's been so many situations that happen in our lives that leave us kind of confused. And so when someone says, no, actually that little voice that you've been ignoring the whole time, like, that's actually the one that's guiding you. It's kind of like, wait, what? I have to rewind and rewrite a story that I've been living for 20 plus years. And yeah, like even just like something super basic, like something that came to my mind was, if you're a little kid and you're eating and you're full, and you're like, hey, like, mom, like, I'm full, I don't want to eat my food anymore. And your mom's like, well, you have to finish it, and then you're just like, but I literally don't want to. And she's like, well, you're going to be wasting the food. And did you even respect me? Because I cooked this dinner and I need you to finish your food. And then so you're just eating the food and you're full and you don't want to be eating it. So there's like, I don't know, obviously that's another conversation with like boundaries and actually like knowing yourself. And, you're just a little kid. You don't want to be outcasted by mom and by the family and just like, right, because that's what we think is happening. But there is just little things like that. Or, you know, oh my God, it just makes me think of alcohol. Like alcohol is the one fucking, I don't know if I can swear on this, but is the one substance that you have to explain yourself for why you don't want it versus why you want it. And it's so annoying when people are just like pushing it on you and they just want you to get drunk and they just want to have a good time. And come on, man, it's going to be so fun. And it's like, I literally just don't want this experience. And now I have to explain like why I'm not drinking and I'm like a bad vibe. So I don't know. It is hard to follow your intuition because generally it can go against what everybody else thinks. And so I think that that's why it is hard for people, you know, when you're teaching people and you're like, yeah, just trust it, you know, and they're just like, but that's like going against what other people think. So I generally find that's actually the bigger thing at large, is that when you step into the space, you're generally going to be different. You're going to be weird. You might be outcasted for a bit. So I think there's this process that people feel uncomfortable by, where there's this rebirth of who you are and how you live. And I think that's the process that requires a mentor, that requires support, that requires courses or whatever, so that you don't feel like a crazy person, right? That you're actually like supported and held and through the process. And I've had to do most of that by myself. And I do think that that is a very, like, I have a very bold personality, but for most people, it's really tough. And once I found mentorship and all that, like now it's just like, oh, okay, it's obvious, right? That successful people, they hire people or they get support or whatever. So even if it's inaccessible to you financially, there's always something that can be done. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like there's something I was gonna say and I forgot it. It's okay.
I just went on a huge rant, so
no, it's fine. So I'm curious, like this question just popped up in my head a little bit ago. So I've seen online with astrology, like there's a lot of people who will say like, if you have like this placement, then like you're like psychic, or if you have like this placement, then like it leads to the like inclination that you're a witch. And I know, of course, like you can still be psychic, you can still be a witch without that placement. But like, is there certain placements that are like that people maybe could look to in their chart for like career or purpose? Because I know you help a lot of people like more specifically with that type of like, what do I do with my life type of stuff.
Yeah, totally. Those are a few different questions, but Pluto is kind of considered the planet that would be witchy. So people who have Pluto in the first house, people who have Pluto in the 8th house, Pluto in the 10th house, you know, that's someone who's like doing their career with that kind of stuff. There's so many different things we could look to. Scorpio placements, of course, that's the witch archetype. That's, you know, that's what it is. But also just like water signs in general. So lots of water placements. But it really depends what type of witch, right? Because if we're talking about like a green witch, so that's going to be like all the earth placements. So, and that's like super common with witchcraft. But with you know, more divinatory type of witch, it's generally you know, the water placements or air placements, because air signs are, you know, generally pretty nerdy and they want to learn about how the universe is working and how it's interconnected and all that stuff. But then we have like the fire witches, which are more about like sexuality and embodiment and who are you and why are you here and what's your purpose. So there is that. I do think that like everybody can be witchy or whatever, and there's different flavors of that. I actually have a quiz on my website. It's coming out. It's not out yet, but it's called like Which Witch Are You? And it has, you can do that and it's a fun thing and whatever when it comes out though, but it's not out yet. I'm sorry. But yeah, and then so I would look to the 8th house. The 8th house is definitely the quote unquote witch house. Again, it's ruled by Scorpio. I've seen people who have their south node in there, which is supposed to represent your past life in astrology. And if it's in Scorpio, or if it's in the 8th house, or if it's like conjunct Pluto, then people would say, or I would say, I don't know who people are, but I would say that that is definitely like someone who died as a witch actually in a past life, or someone who was like a sex worker, or someone who was doing, you know, things that were taboo and all this stuff. And I say that to people sometimes. I'm like, okay, so like, we can explore this part of your chart if you're open to it. And I say it to them and they're like, holy shit, I've had dreams like that, you know, my whole life. And so there is like an affirming thing that happens there. But also, you know, I would look to the placement of the moon for intuition, and how, you know, how the moon is feeling. If the moon doesn't feel safe, then nothing else can really express. So the moon needs to be taken care of, and it needs to feel like it's able to be itself. And so if the moon is not embodied, like the other parts of the chart won't really, quote unquote, get activated or whatever. And then, of course, we have transits. So, you know, certain transits in the sky can activate someone to be like, oh, I want to be a witch. Like, I'm actually going to make this real right now, where, you know, Sun, Venus is going to be in Scorpio, you know, near the end of the month. And it's going to be new moon in Scorpio. And it's just like, I'm like, there's going to be a bunch of people that are like, you know what? Fuck it. I want to try witchcraft. Or I want to like pull some tarot cards. Or, yeah, I've always been into crystals. Or, you know, so there definitely is different timings as well that can be activated. But there's that. And so in terms of soul purpose, that's another thing. But, you know, there's 3 houses in astrology that are kind of like the career houses. So I can look to certain houses to actually predict or guess what someone is doing with their life. And that's kind of my thing, you know. I can guess like people's careers, or I can guess what they should be doing. Or so you look to the 2nd house, and what you have in the 2nd house. If you don't have anything in there, then it'll get activated by transits. But what rules the 2nd house and what planets are in there can indicate like how you make money and how to make more money, and what you do to make money and how you spend money and all that. And then the 6th house is like what you do day to day as your work, so like your physical labor around your career. And then your 10th house is like what you actually do for a living, and what it is that people see you as in your sphere, and what it is that you do as a job. So generally I would like look to those placements and kind of just like go like woo, and then just see like what's happening. But I don't know if that's helpful, but it's so person to person. And that's the thing, is having a birth chart reading or is such a mystical experience, because it's not really something that can be described, because it's literally you. It's literally your soul like getting like revived from the cosmos. And that's why it's, you know, even if you can read your own chart, like that's amazing. But there's something that happens when you know, have your chart read by an astrologer. Like when I had my chart read by my teacher, and you know, he was like $600, and I waited like a whole year to have a reading with him. And it was just like my heart is just like exploded open, and I was like, okay, this is it. You know, the things that I know in my chart gets like validated by him, and then different pieces come together, and I can ask any questions. So there really is like, it sounds really mystical, but I do find it actually pretty grounded in a way. I know most people would never like describe astrology as grounded, but I actually feel like it just helps me make sense of reality and of life, and it just gives me that permission and guidance and a map and a direction. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that definitely does. Like I always find it like so interesting. I knew about like the 10th house, but I didn't know about like the 2nd house and the 6th house relating to like what we could be doing for career and things like that. Um yeah, and then like I didn't know the Pluto was related to like witchcraft and things like that too. So, or the thing about the moon, that was really cool too. Like that feels like such an important thing that I've never, maybe it's just I have limited interactions with other astrologers, but like just that simple thing of like knowing like if your moon doesn't feel safe, then it's going to feel really hard for you to do the rest of your have the rest of your chart like come out and be who you are. I'm like, wow, this makes so much sense. I had my moon in like my fourth house, which is like with family and stuff. So I'm like, of course, I had to wait till I got older and I could like distance myself from my family and figure out who I was and like all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's really like I feel like there's so many like golden nuggets for people in that. That's really awesome.
That's good. I'm happy to hear that because sometimes I just go on rants and I don't really know what I've talked about. But yeah, like that's the thing with astrology is it's literally a study for life. And I think people who, study astrology, they know that. But it's also then there's like people who like know that, like when I look at my chart, I'm literally like getting downloads all the time. And it's not that I've been looking at my chart for freaking years, and I still gain new information and new insight, or I'll get a reading by another. I'm just like, I love to get readings by astrologers, even though I'm an astrologer, just because like there is something really affirming about it. I don't know. It's just like this weird thing I like doing. But yeah, and I had like, I have my moon conjunct Mars in Leo, and I don't know if you know Becca Tarnas, but she's this famous astrologer, daughter of Richard Tarnas, and she was at Burning Man, and I was at Burning Man, and there was like this astrologer's tent, and it was my first year, and so obviously I'm going to the astrologer's tent, and she's there, and I didn't actually know what she looked like, and I didn't know who she was, but my intuition was like, get a reading with that girl, because they were just like casually reading charts, just for fun for like 20 minutes or whatever. And I was like, okay, I want to read her. And then I found out it was Becca Tarnas, and I was like, holy shit, that's crazy. But so she took a look at my chart, and she said, oh, okay, so I see you have your moon and Mars like conjunct in the same sign in Leo. And she's like, that's the sign, that's the placement of a dancer. And I literally just broke down crying like instantly. And I was like, holy shit, like that's in my chart. And I didn't like, I have such a deep relationship with dance, and I have such a deep relationship with like love and self-acceptance and movement. And I've never had an astrologer say that to me. So there's just like these little things that get picked up. And I even have a better story than I was so I was working in the homeless shelters, right? Before I was doing this, and I was still looking at my chart. I was still studying. And so I have my sun and Saturn in Pisces in the fourth house. If that's confusing, just picture sun in Pisces. So I'm a Pisces in the fourth house. And I was just like, okay, yeah, just like looking at my chart, whatever. And then one day I just looked at my chart and I was like, holy shit. Like, I cannot believe that I didn't notice that I freaking have, so sun in Pisces, like what does that mean? So your sun can be a simple expression of what you're here to do, right? What your soul purpose is, how you're evolving, the archetype that you're here to play, the character, the body that you're embodying every day. So in Pisces, what does that mean? Pisces rules spirituality and intuition and compassion, non-judgmental nature and love and all of that, because Pisces is blending with source because it's the end of the wheel and blah, blah, blah. So what does that mean? That also means the shadow side of Pisces is actually substance abuse, mental illness, feeling lost and confused, and not having a direction. And so I was like, I just knew that of Pisces or whatever. And I was like, okay, that's my sun in Pisces in the fourth house. So the fourth house is the house of home, right? It's the house of your ancestry, your roots, where you come from, your sense of safety, your relationship to your family, like your literal home life. So I was working in the homeless shelter with people with substance abuse and addiction find home.
Yeah.
And I literally was freaking out. I was like, how did I not see that? That's like a literal definition of what I could be doing with my life. And so, obviously there's a whole bunch of different ways that the signs can manifest. And, I could be one of those people that is mentally ill and substance abused and in like a shelter. Like, that's totally a possible manifestation, right? Or I could be working on the other side of the desk. So anyways, or I could be helping people find home within themselves now, like through magic and mysticism and all of that, which is also Pisces and 4th house. And so I was just freaking out. But it's just stuff like that where it's just like actually so specific that you can read it like that, like, and it just continuously blows my mind. Like I don't even, yeah,
Yeah,
anyways.
I had the last astrology reading I had like something to explain like just like one little placement to me, and it was like, this is like the motivation for why I do like my whole life. What the heck? Like, how did you see that in this one placement? Yeah, it was
Yeah.
pretty wild. Um, dang. So is there for astrology, like, is there anything that's like your favorite like placement to do with people, or like, you know, something that you're like, oh, not a lot of people know this, but this is like a thing that's really cool or something like that?
I have to think about that because that does come up. Um, I don't know. I think everybody's so different, and it just like kind of happens in the moment.
Mm,
And we're usually just like freaking out together at kind of like, like that story I just said, it'll be like something specific with that. But I really like looking at um yeah, people's like witchy placements,
yeah.
like that's super exciting for me, and to see like how that manifests, or what they, just if I give them permission in some type of realm that they're like, I was literally wanting to do that my whole life and you just told me that I should be doing that. And so like that's pretty cool. Um no, it's very specific. I think like Chiron is very interesting,
Mhm.
and just Mars in general, and Aries energy in general. So those three things, I guess. So, like with Chiron, there's an aspect to Chiron that is pretty intense. And I think people just kind of like brush it off a little bit. They're like, oh yeah, like Chiron, it's like where I have like pain or like, wounding. It's like, that's some deep shit right there. And that's some like serious space for healing. And that is, you don't just like whip out someone's Chiron, you have to like build up the comfort of the call. You have to build your authority. You have to make them trust you, and then eventually you can pull in like, hey, was this like part of your trauma growing up? Did you experience this thing? And let's work through that together. And there's something so validating about hearing that your life isn't like an accident, or there isn't something wrong. I got bullied really, really badly growing up, and I had Chiron in the 11th house, which is the house of friendships and community and tribe and people. And so there's one aspect of Chiron that's like your pain, your trauma, but then there's the highest expression of Chiron where he's the wounded healer, right? So where he takes his gifts from what he's learned of his trauma, and he helps and heals people with it. So the highest expression of Chiron is actually helping other people with it, or even making money from it. So if you think about that, like I have Chiron in the 11th house, but I actually create a coven of mystical people to come together that are the outcasts and the weirdos. So you can kind of look and see how that all can play out. So Chiron's pretty cool. I also like talking about Mars in people's charts. Because Mars is the god of war, and yeah, there's some parts to Mars that people, especially modern astrologers, especially just people on TikTok, they don't talk about, because Mars is actually, yeah, he's if we're talking about the god of war, what does that mean? That includes bloodshed, murder, rape, um like violence of all kinds. And that we have that inside of us actually, and we carry certain martial energies. And I do think it's important to like recognize certain parts of that chart, certain parts of that, or maybe like why that part of you can't express.
Mhm.
So there's like, that is really interesting, which a lot of people aren't gonna like go up on social media and just be like, yeah, Mars is like the rapist. It's just like not, it's a very sensitive
Yeah.
subject, but it's actually like, that's a real energy that's in our world that people don't really talk about. And so obviously, we can channel that in a much better better way. But yeah, so I like talking about like sexual primal energy. I like talking about taboo things that people don't talk about. I like giving a lot of permission. I like talking about Chiron and healing wounds. Like there's basically nothing off the table with me, and everything just like I want everything to feel safe, and I want everything to feel like it's just an open container to transcend it. And that's the thing that's so amazing about astrology is, and also witchcraft and magic, is that it's the awareness of what you've been given that creates the transformation. And so that's what's so cool about astrology, is that you don't actually have to do anything. You literally just understand the light side and the shadow side of the whole, and of you in particular, and that allows the transformation. So once you have the language of astrology, you say, oh, like that's just my Chiron acting up, or like, oh, my partner has a really active Mars, and he's just yelling at me right now because his Mars is activated, and like that's actually like it's okay, it's just part of him, or whatever. And yeah, I think that's just how I understand like people and life and why certain things happen. It makes the world a little bit of a softer place.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I really like the point of view of like just looking at the chart, your birth chart is like that's how you are, and not feeling like it's good or bad or you need to manage it or change it. It's like this just part of me is here and it's being activated right now. I really like that kind of perspective for it because I have an Aries moon. So I'm like constantly
Totally.
trying to tell my partner, like, I'm just gonna get excited for everything. And like I might just like yell for like in our house, I'll just like need to like yell in the cupboard, just because I need to let it out, and it's like there's nothing like wrong about it. It's just like that's who I am. And I feel like that like the self-acceptance, that's why I like using like tools like astrology or like human designer things, because it can give people a lot of like self-acceptance. Like that's just what normally like wants to come out in me or is in me, and I shouldn't be like trying to like fit into like whatever societal standard. It's really freeing.
Totally. Yeah, I love that that Aries moon delineation of you needing to like scream into the cupboard and stuff. That yeah, that totally makes sense because like I said, like Aries is ruled by Mars.
Yeah.
So that primal energy that does need to like come out. And so if it doesn't come out in a healthy way, then it can come out in unhealthy ways, just as Pisces rules mental illness and substance abuse and all that. There's always the light and dark with everything. And I guess, yeah, nothing really phases me anymore, because I do feel so rooted in this truth that we are all just these archetypes. And there's just something really, yeah, it's almost like relaxing of just knowing that like people behave like it's not about you, or it's not about this, or it's not about that. It's like we're all just going through our own experiences, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And it's a lot to digest, but I do feel that deeply.
So you talked about like transits a little bit, and I want to like ask you more about that. I've never heard, again, I'm probably not like the best person to be like, I've never heard, I'm not an expert in astrology, obviously, but I like that you brought up like certain parts can be like activated through transits. And I'm kind of aware of like when they talk about like moons and things like that, where they're like, for these signs, it's gonna feel like that, and for these signs, it's gonna feel like that. But I didn't even know like it could be like so specific how you're saying like maybe during this time you might feel like a witch, like you're ready to step into that role. Like, is there any I know you like touched on the Scorpio like new moon, but is there transits for like the rest of the year that might like activate people or
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's so specific to like people's charts.
Hmm.
And to be honest, like yeah, I have this relationship with transits where like if you actually follow your transits and you look at them, it's freaking crazy, right? Because it explains what can happen in your day, what you can expect, the type of energy, how you'll feel. Like all of that is happening because there's the planets that are moving in the sky are hitting your birth chart. And so when you were born, there's this magical moment that happens where basically you get a snapshot of the universe, and that's you, and that's supposed to represent what you experience. And for some reason it's just really accurate, as above so below, I don't know. But the planets are still moving, right? So, and also you can imagine basically you're walking around with a little circle above your head, or you can actually imagine the constellations and the planets in it and whatever. And every time you leave the house or every time you wake up in the morning, it's getting activated. So if me and you right now, our charts are being activated, they're on top of each other. So you bring out a certain thing in me, I bring out a certain thing in you, and we're either compatible or we're not. And so there's things that are always happening with every person we meet, every animal we meet, every plant, everything has this astrological energy. And so when I talk about like the energy for everybody, it's not as specific. And to be honest, like when I talk about, I'm going to be more dedicated to doing transits and stuff on my Instagram, like regularly with reels, but it's kind of just to give people a taste of astrology and to get into that world and to hope it resonates. But what I would say mostly is to track your own transits. And really, like, there can be some really simple ways to do that. But like getting to know your houses, getting to know, yes, like the moon sign is one of the most basic ones and the easiest ways to get into it. You just download a moon app. You literally just look up like moon astrology or something and it'll come up, and you get to know the cycles. If you don't know the different waxing and waning phases, get to know that, get to know the archetypes of astrology. And then if it's like like a new moon in Scorpio, then you journal about it. So you say, this is how I'm feeling today, this is what happened in my day, and then you can see what lines up for you and what how you feel. So I actually know how I'm going to feel on certain days, and I'm open to the surprises. Like I love just like living my life. I don't really like to look to that like transits and stuff too much because I do find it can dictate my reality. So I like to have a bit of mystery, but the moon is very reliable. And I think like that's a really good thing. But yeah, I mean, we're just coming into a bunch of Scorpio season, right? And so that's also the thing about your birth chart, is it's not fully activated all the time. Like it's just not, and so you can see what is activated at certain times of your life by looking at your transits. So you can see, like, let's say you have a lot of Gemini placements, when there's a lot of planets that are in Gemini, they're going to be hitting a certain part of your chart. Maybe you have all of your planets in the house of career, maybe you have your planets in the house of relationships, maybe you're going through a big shift with that. But yeah, I mean, if we're looking at the big picture of astrology, like I don't feel super optimistic, and so I'm hoping to get to be surprised by what happens with the state of the world. But I was known, in 2020 as the girl who predicted COVID and whatever, and it's like I didn't really predict COVID. I just predicted that shit was going to hit the fan economically, and something was going to happen, and I was just kind of regurgitating what other astrologers were saying because they're more like historians and I don't really have time for that, but they are like, and so I think like moving forward, we are in an interesting time right now, and it's a big time in evolution of society as a whole. And I think like really getting super rooted in your spiritual practices and really working with money. I'll just give a little hint around that, like really creating a lot of safety, a lot of excitement, a lot of love, a lot of gratitude around money, and just doing your thing. just doing your thing and moving forward and loving the witchy season, like loving all of the October vibes and just like fully being in the present. That's what I'm gonna say, because I'm a little bit worried on more so like Aquarius stuff coming in. Like I'm more so thinking about like AI and robots and virtual reality. So that's kind of like in the near future. But anyways, yeah, this is why I'm not good with transits. I'm still like trying to figure out like how I want to convey like the certain things that I'm like seeing. And I'm like, it's so much better when it's just like personally for one person rather than like the state of the world. Cause I'm like, you really want to hear what's going on with the state of the world? Like, I don't know if you're ready for it, man. So yeah, I'm trying to like be optimistic. But yeah, I hope that wasn't too dark.
No, that's cool. Yeah. I think like the transits, I know a lot of people who start getting into astrology, like they're just learning like the zodiac signs. But I find like I interact with a lot of people who are like, yeah, I just woke up feeling really like sad today, or like, yeah, I just don't want to be perceived today. And like, I feel like people like they're like trying to figure out why, or it's like they always are like, why am I not normal? Like, why am I not my
Mm,
normal self? And they're like, I don't know, like it feels like the energy of like them conveying is like they're trying to understand. And I feel like it's probably like, oh, like look at your transits. Like that's
yeah,
probably why you're feeling this way. Yeah, it's
totally.
so interesting. Like I feel like a lot of people have like beef with like not feeling okay. I'm like the complete opposite. I'm just like, whatever, I feel shitty today. It's fine. But like I I think that that could be like really also an affirming thing for people if they like look up, oh, what's going on in the sky today? Oh, this makes sense. You know, like this planet is like in this placement for my birth chart. Oh, okay.
I'm supposed to feel shitty.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is something to astrology like that where yeah, like you said, there's nothing wrong with anything. And so that belief is really intense for people. And I still sometimes I question that, but what do you mean there's nothing wrong? Of course there's something wrong. Like there's tons of things that are wrong with the world. And so to have this belief that like no, there's actually like whatever this is like there's a higher force that is explaining why we're living this way. And like let's just take it down a notch. We are, or take it up, like whatever, we're floating on a ball in space. We're technically aliens, right? We're like human beings, whatever that is. Like we're flesh and bone, and we happen to have a consciousness and what we perceive as intelligence. And we're just like that. We just have a finite time of being on Earth, and then we don't know. And just as we don't know as where we came from, we're gonna go back to that same space of that womb space, that hole, that emptiness, that cosmic blackness. And we're just trying to figure out what the fuck we're doing here. And I think like actually it would make sense that there is an explanation for the planets in the sky are what we can see, because astrology is actually what we can see.
Mm.
So it's from our point of view on Earth versus from space's point of view, which is why astronomers freak out at astrology, because they're like, it's not accurate. And then astrologers are like, we know this. We totally know this, that none of this is really accurate. It's actually symbolic. So just like try and wrap your head around that. And it's like, well, I'm just gonna try and wrap my head around the fact that I'm freaking human in the first place. So I don't even, I just, if I could have any answers to my existence, like I'll take it. I'm not gonna be like, well, that doesn't make any sense to my physical matter of what I believe is real. It's like we don't know shit. Like we don't know anything, and to claim that we know everything is hilarious. And there's different situations where our minds open all the time. And like I felt like I got taught about death for the first time, like what would actually happen to me when I died, like for the first time like a few years ago. And that's a truth that rings in me and has to do with dreams and astral travel and whatever, and we don't have to go there. But there's just new truths and new realities that we decide and that we create. And frankly, I just want to live in a magical world.
Mm.
So that's the reality that I've decided, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I love that you're like yeah, I don't really know what's going on. And then it's like all the things that you teach are like the stuff where it's like there's no like backing for science or things like that. And you're like, these are the things that are gonna help me figure out what's going on. Like it's so funny to me, like the non-scientific, non-provable things can provide so much more
Yes.
insight and like comfort and permission for us. Which is like just blows my mind all the time. So
Yeah, I think so too. And I've actually found that the scientific stuff is not as trustworthy actually. But I don't know. You're just talking about Pisces as well, so
yes,
yeah.
very I was literally thinking when you were talking like this is a very like Piscean thing to say.
Yeah, I'm a Scorpio rising as
Oh,
well. So it's like, the end of the world. It's very Pisces Scorpio, I guess. Yeah. But that's just what we are. We're those archetypes. And I think like if we're constantly making decisions and stuff, so we might as well do it intentionally. So
yeah.
yeah.
There's one other thing that you mentioned earlier that I'd love for you to expand on. Like you talked about like the shadow side of the signs. I feel like maybe I've heard it like once or twice, but like, is there a place where people could look that up? Because I never,
Mm,
because I think like maybe a lot of the meme astrology accounts, they post things like that, but without
sure.
saying like this is the
Sure,
shadow
sure.
side. And I feel like probably a lot of people look at it and they're like, that's not me, or like maybe one part of it. But I feel like understanding it in terms of like the shadow side, it puts a lot of perspective. I feel like, I don't know, it did for me when you're explaining it.
That's really interesting, and I almost want to make an offering around that, like just the shadows. Like not even talking about the benefits or the positives or the light side, like just your shitty parts. I bet you like people would sign up for that. They'd be like, "I want that. Like tell
Yeah.
me this." No, I think I will make an offering like that, or even just something for free, like a freebie or something, because
Yeah.
I definitely, yeah. Well, I think that a lot of people don't want to necessarily be called out on social media. And so I think that's why a lot of people don't really talk about like, hey, let me talk about like you when you're at your lowest potential. Like, let's just talk about you when you suck, like people don't they go on social media, they don't want to they want to feel good, right? They
Yeah.
don't want to be like, shit, man, I'm just called out, I got to work with her. But maybe, but yeah, so I don't know, because I teach this stuff in my containers, like and definitely when I do readings, like I'm not just going to say like this is just the great parts of you, right? Like it's super important to understand the shadows so that you can, know when you're behaving in that. And that's the thing about the chart, is that astrologers say that throughout the life you're going to experience all of the possible manifestations, the shadow and the light side, at least once in your life. And so yeah, I guess like it's just really about learning the archetypes, and really about like, yes, understanding the light sides, but also like I got a lot of my astrology knowledge from people, like from, I have Mercury in Aquarius and Venus in Aquarius. I love studying people, and I love studying like why they do the things they do and why they behave in a certain way and why some people are weird and why some people are normal. Like I just love all of it. And I think that really understanding the archetypes is the shadow and the light side, right? But I actually have a ebook. My website is being redone, but I have an ebook. It's like super low cost, and it's just like a foundations to astrology, and it's how to read your birth chart and stuff like that. So if you want that, send me a DM like personally on Instagram, and I will send it to you depending on when this comes out and when my website gets updated and stuff. But yeah, send me a DM and I can send it to you, because it's really amazing. It has the light and the shadow things, it has everything there. But yeah, I think just like most good astrology courses and stuff should teach that. And the thing is like I don't really trust reading astrology online. Like my sister, my 19-year-old apprentice, she's been looking like learning astrology from Google, and I'm like, my love, that's not It's not the way. You got to get a book, you know, you got to read all the books, because it's just not like a reliable source. And there's like so much clickbait, and there's, I don't know, like there was like a girl who had me on the podcast, on a podcast, and she was like, okay, so tell me, what's the worst sign to date? And I was like, oh, I was just like, no, I can't do this type of language, you know? So yeah, there's just like stuff like that that you have to be careful of. But yeah, I'm like, we could do a whole freaking episode on that. Like I
That'd
could
be
just
really
talk
cool.
about that forever, like the shadow sides of
Yeah.
each sign. But so with all shadow sides of, you know, the astrological signs, it's just important to know the signs and to know that that part of you like is there and can be activated. It's not that the shadow parts ever really go away. It's that we learn how to manage them. I'll give an example. So, you know, let's say you have a Leo moon. So that's a fire moon. The positive manifestation of a Leo moon would be someone who's really warm and really fun and really dramatic and wants to be seen and performing and is fun and playful and really is like affectionate and wants a lot of attention and love and just purely living from the heart. But then the shadow side of a Leo moon would be like seeking external validation or feeling really, really emotional when not feeling like you're good enough, or you know, getting really sensitive by other people's amazing talents and qualities, or you know, just being like, hey, am I amazing? Do you love me enough? Like, is this okay? Like, and so the moon would be seeking safety or seeking that validation, and that can get triggered at different times. So each of the signs and each of the planets has this quote unquote positive or negative association, and I don't really like to say it like that. That's why I say shadow and light. But even that, it's just part of it, right? There's just nobody that is just fully highly activated and happy and great the whole time. Like, we're human beings with a complex series of emotions and experiences. And so yeah, you know, it kind of just, once you have the language, you can just understand like what's the highest expression of this placement. And I think like the simple answer to your question is studying astrology from someone who's credible and someone who really knows, and reading books and, you know, doing the thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, I might make like maybe I'll make a reel, or maybe I'll do like, yeah, a series or something on the shadow sides, because that is fun and different and people don't do that. So
Yeah. And like I'm really like I help people with trauma healing and stuff. Like I'm very comfortable in those like taboo spaces and stuff. So like I I often call people out with my stuff that I post too. Like, and I'm just like, it just needs to be said. So like I think it's cool because like I don't look at it as like a bad part, but you know, like I'm really into human design also, and they have like the self and the not self theme. So it's like, you
yes.
know, when you're not feeling yourself and when you are. And like that is kind of like how I like to think of it. Like when you're talking about like the shadow sides of the signs, I'm like, that makes sense because then I can tell like more when I'm feeling activated or when I'm needing that like care and attention or whatever it is that's like coming out and is like asking for that. Like I look at it more from like that trauma informed kind of like point of view. And I think it can be really like eye-opening for people
Yeah,
to see like, oh, I do like with this one person, I always start acting like this with them, you know, then you can start, okay, so let me unpack that. Why is this happening? Because I feel like for my moon, I definitely the Aries moon, I feel like I'm at a point in my life where like I'll be in the argument and I'm like, oh God, I'm just like going so hard for no reason. Like, I don't need to do this. Like,
oh my
but like the
god.
Aries in me is like, you gotta argue and you gotta win. And like, and I'm just like, I'm in the middle of the argument. I'm like, this is a bit like much. I don't need to do this. Like, so I think like stuff like that would be cool to know because then you can start like recognizing yourself and how you're acting and like when these patterns are playing out and like it can probably potentially reveal like where healing needs to be or where we need to be like more compassionate with ourselves or all those things. Yeah.
Totally, totally. I'll send you over when I make that thing, I'll send it over to you so you can dive into your shadows. Yeah, that sounds very moon and fourth house of you also, that you have this trauma perspective, right? Because the fourth house is all around safety too, and that's how you help people in that space. So totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I forgot what it was. I have like my Libra, I think it's in my fifth house or something. So like injustice is like a really big thing for me too. So
What's
yeah,
your sun sign?
Cancer.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm also
Oh,
a 0 degrees Cancer. So I'm like,
okay.
yeah, it gets pretty
Well, that's nice though. And I love Cancer. And you actually look so Cancers, they look like the moon, right? So you have a really round
yeah.
face. Yeah, I can tell by Cancers because they're very voluptuous and they're round and they have big eyes and like big like round lips sometimes. And yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah. Okay, so before we end, where can people find you on the internet? How can they work with you? If you have anything coming up, feel free to talk about that.
Yeah, so the best place to find me is on Instagram. I'm Luna Veronica Mystic. But please, please be careful of all the weird scammers and stuff like that. Especially my new followers. I just feel so bad. It's so awkward. But I'll never DM you asking you for a reading. You got to DM me first. And yeah, I have around like 15,000 followers. So that's my account with the highlights and everything. So yeah. And just send me a message. Just say hi. Just say that you listen to us on the Witchy and Weird podcast. And if you have any questions, you can totally reach out. And I have a bunch of different offerings on my website, like courses. You can book a birth chart reading with me. I got the Baby Witch Academy and all the different things. But for things that are coming up, I'm actually going to be hosting a Samhain astrological embodiment ritual with my friend Riva Wild, and she's amazing. She's really special, and she's gonna lead us through this like dance embodiment sensual practice to connect to our ancestors. And then I'm going to explain Samhain, what Halloween is, and that if you want to do a ritual with that on your own, and that astrology energy. So we're going to take the nerdy stuff and we're going to put it into our bodies, basically get out of our head into our bodies. So that's happening on Halloween. And if you want access to that, you can just DM me and I'll send you a link. And I think that's what's coming up. Yeah, I think that's all for now. I also have a podcast called Words Are Spells. So if you like my rants, there's lots more where that came from. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm okay. I wanted to ask this because you brought up Samhain. I know like there's the whole thing about like the veil getting thinner. Is there like
Mm-hmm.
astrological like support for that? The
Oh
veil?
yeah, well there's just gonna be like lots of planets in Scorpio. It's just
Okay.
Scorpio energy mainly, which is like the bridge between life and death and transformation and that death and rebirth and that, connection to the unseen and the taboo and ghosts and spirits. Like that's just Scorpio. So everybody's like, woohoo, Halloween, and I'm like, that's me every day, bitch. But no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, that's essentially what it is. Because I was also looking to that. Um, and yeah, it's generally there's Scorpio vibes. So to keep it simple.
That makes sense. Yeah, I had like a client like ask me like you're a psychic, is this true? Like the veil is thinner. And I was like, I guess like because multiple cultures believe this, so it must have some
Totally.
truth in it. But like I can just open the veil whenever I want because I'm like a psychic. So to me, it doesn't. I'm like, sure, yeah, but that makes
Yeah.
sense. The Scorpio
Well,
energy. Yeah.
also there's a thing in the birth chart with South Node, which is like past lives. So some people actually feel really connected to their past lives. They feel really connected to their ancestry. Like you have your moon in the fourth house and you're a Cancer. So that literally rules like past, right? Like Cancer rules the past and Capricorn rules the future. So you have that awareness of the past and your ancestors and what came before you. And so you probably you are just the embodiment of that, which for other people could get activated, or for other people who have their south node, their relationship to their past lives, or something that happens in their fourth house, or something that happens with the moon, it could all get activated for them. And while other people are like, I don't really feel this. So again, it's very dependent on archetypes. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Jewish, so the past is such a huge Judaism. They're
I'm Jewish too.
Yeah, they're never forget, light your yahrzeit candle for your grandma that passed. I'm named after my past relatives, and my North Node is in Scorpio, so
there you go. Yeah, I mean, well, I also grew up like that, with hearing about the Holocaust and how lucky we are to be alive. And yeah, there's some deep witch stuff there as well. Just healing a lot of trauma.
Yep,
so
basically.
yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much for being here, for taking time out of your schedule and I think it'd be cool to bring you on to do just the shadow sides later, obviously, but that'd be really cool. Yeah, thank you so much, and until next time, everyone, goodbye. If you love Witchy and Weird podcasts, support us by donating monthly for as little as 99 cents at anchor.fm/witchyandweird/support. You can cancel at any time, and 100% of the proceeds go directly to the pod. Or, if you don't want to commit to a monthly donation, buy a coffee at ko-fi.com/wishyandweird to help fuel them while they record, edit, create, and upload content for the podcast. And if you're feeling extra generous, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and tell your witchy and weird friends about us too. Bye!